Hello, Taurus. You are standing on the other side of a piece of news that hasn't reached you yet. That's the clearest way I can describe what I'm feeling the moment I tune into your energy, not in the past, not still in the middle of waiting with no end in sight. On the other side, right at the edge of it. Close enough that if you're paying attention, and I think you are, otherwise you wouldn't be here, you can almost feel the shift that's about to happen, even though the actual words, the actual call, the actual message that carries it hasn't landed yet. That's where you are. And I want you to feel the significance of that position before we go a single step further. Because there's a very specific feeling that lives in the space just before big news arrives. It's different from ordinary waiting. It has a texture to it, a kind of pressure behind the ears, a heightened alertness that activates when your unconscious already knows something is close before your conscious mind has caught up. Every time your phone lights up, there's a beat of extra attention. Every time a notification arrives from an unexpected number or name, your heartbeat does something slightly different than it does with ordinary messages. If that has been your experience lately, even in small ways, I want you to understand that it isn't anxiety without cause. It's intuition with accurate information. Something is genuinely incoming, and it's bigger than your everyday life. And here is something I want you to hear immediately. Before we go any further into this reading, you did not find this video by accident. I know that can sound like a generic thing to say in a reading like this, but I want you to actually consider it rather than let it slide past. The specific impulse that brought you here, whatever you were doing before you clicked, whatever small chain of events led you to this title at this particular moment, that was your own intuition navigating you toward confirmation of something it was already picking up. The fact that the words big news and changes everything caught you enough to stop and click when you could have kept scrolling means something. Your deeper knowing was already resonating with this before your logical mind had any evidence to justify it. Take a breath with me right now. In, fully, and slowly. And as you let it out, I want you to make a deliberate, conscious choice to let yourself believe for this entire reading without immediately managing it back down that the news you're about to receive is going to move things in a direction you want them to go. I know that might feel like a risk. I know that after a stretch of things not going the way you needed them to, hoping hard has started to feel like setting yourself up. I understand exactly why that protective reflex developed, but I want you to borrow, just for the next little while, a version of yourself who hasn't had to brace quite so hard, because that version of you is actually closer to the truth of where you're standing right now than the braced one is. Let's talk about the news itself, because this is the heart of everything, and I want to be as honest and grounded with you as I know how to be. What I'm sensing isn't small. I want to be clear about that, because I think you've had enough small developments that turned out to be less significant than they initially promised. What I'm picking up on has the quality of a real turning point, the kind of news that lands and creates a visible before and after in your life, the kind where you mark the date in your memory afterward, not because you plan to, but because the information reshapes enough of your landscape that the day it arrived becomes a reference point. What happened before this news? What happened after? Now, I always want to be honest with you about what I can and can't sense, and I don't want to overstate certainty. What I'm describing is the energetic weight and quality of what's approaching, not a specific outcome. I can map down to the exact word that will be said to you. But I want you to know that the weight I'm feeling around this is real, and it's significant. This isn't a minor update on something in motion. This is news that changes the shape of what comes next. Let's talk about what kind of news this might be. because I sense the energy here could be converging from a few different directions depending on your situation, and I want you to feel which thread resonates most truly. For a number of you, this is news you've been waiting on from an institutional source, something connected to an application, a process, a decision that was being made by someone other than you in a place you don't have direct visibility into. A job you applied for, a loan or financial approval you're waiting on, an application of some kind, housing, legal, medical, educational, where someone else holds the answer and you've been in the frustrating position of simply waiting for them to deliver it. The news coming toward you in this category has the quality of a verdict being handed down, and I'm sensing that verdict landing in your favor. I want to add something to this particular thread because I think it matters. This kind of institutional waiting where the outcome you need is entirely in someone else's hands is one of the most quietly exhausting forms of uncertainty that exists. You can't do more to influence it. You can't work harder or hope harder to move the needle. You are simply waiting, and all you can do is live your life in the meantime while the answer you need sits somewhere undelivered. If this is your thread, I want to acknowledge how depleting that particular kind of powerlessness is, and I want you to know that the end of that powerlessness is very close. The answer is about to arrive, and the waiting, which has asked so much of your patience, is almost over. For others, the news feels more personal, coming from a specific person rather than an institution. Someone who has been sitting on something significant, something that once communicated to you will visibly shift the status of your relationship with them, a decision they've made, a feeling they've finally arrived at clearly enough to voice, something they've been working through internally that is now resolved into something they're ready to say out loud. This kind of news tends to arrive with emotion on both ends, the person delivering it carrying the weight of having held it, the person receiving it feeling the impact of finally having something uncertain become definite. If this is your thread, you may already feel a particular charged quality in the silence around a specific relationship right now, a silence that feels like it's holding its breath rather than simply being empty. And for a third group of you, the news has a creative or entrepreneurial quality, something connected to something you've been building, developing, or putting yourself into that is about to receive a response. A creative project getting recognition, a business development delivering results, a risk you took on something you cared about, finally showing you whether it was the right risk. This category of news tends to arrive with a combination of relief and validation, not just the practical good news, but the confirmation that trusting yourself about this was the right call, even during the stretches where you had to keep trusting it without proof. I'd genuinely love to know which of these threads feels closest to your situation right now. Share it in the comments, because I think it will help sharpen your awareness of exactly what to be looking for in the coming hours and days. Now, let me talk about the form this news is going to arrive in, because the title of this reading mentions both a call and a message, and I want to address that honestly. I keep sensing a directness about how this comes to you, not buried in a long chain of communication, not something you have to piece together or interpret from indirect signals. This is going to feel like someone specifically choosing to contact you for the express purpose of delivering this. Whether that's a phone call, someone's actual voice in real time, saying words that matter, or a message that has the weight and presence of something carefully composed rather than dashed off, the quality of the delivery is going to match the quality of the content. This isn't news that slips in sideways. It arrives on purpose, from someone who chose to make sure it reached you directly. There's also something about the timing of this that I keep noticing as I sit with your energy. It feels like it's going to arrive at a moment when you aren't fully expecting it, not on the exact day or at the exact hour you've been watching most intently. This is the pattern big news often follows. You brace and watch for it so hard for a stretch that exhaustion eventually sets in and your guard drops slightly. And in that slightly less guarded, slightly more ordinary moment, that's when it lands. Not because the universe enjoys the drama of catching you off guard, but because the moments when our attention is a little softer and less controlled tend to be the ones where we're most genuinely able to receive what arrives. So if you've been holding your breath and watching for this with intense focus, I want to gently invite you to exhale a little. Keep your awareness soft and open. The news is coming. It doesn't need you to stare at the door for it to find its way through. Let's go deeper into something I think needs to be said, because I sense it's sitting underneath a lot of the emotional weight you've been carrying lately. The news that's incoming isn't just going to change your circumstances. It's going to change what you believe is possible for you. And that second kind of change, the internal one, the shift in what your own imagination allows itself to picture as actually within your reach, is the more lasting and significant of the two. Practical circumstances can shift back. Belief in what's available to you, once genuinely updated by real evidence, tends to stick. And the specific news approaching you has the quality of real evidence. Not theoretical possibility, not maybe someday this could work. Actual tangible confirmation that the version of your life you've been quietly hoping for is not a fantasy. It's forming, it's real, and it chose you. Have you been finding yourself lately almost afraid to let your imagination run fully into what life could look like if things went well? Like you've been keeping your hopes on a shorter leash than you used to, specifically to protect yourself from the height of the fall if they don't work out? I'd love for you to share that in the comments, because I think a lot of you have been doing exactly that, and I think this news is the thing that's going to give you permission to extend that leash again. Now, I want to address something honestly, because I think the next piece matters as much as the news itself. The moment big news arrives, real, significant, life-changing news, there's a psychological phenomenon that most people don't expect and aren't prepared for. The first response often isn't pure, uncomplicated joy. It's a strange mixture. Relief, yes, but alongside it sometimes a kind of disorientation, like the map you've been navigating by has suddenly been replaced with a different one, and even though the new map shows a better landscape, your nervous system needs a beat to catch up to the fact that it's allowed to relax now. Some people, when something this significant arrives, actually feel a flash of doubt before the joy sets in. A wait, is this real? Response? A reaching to reread the message, to replay the words from the call, to make sure they understood it correctly. This isn't skepticism, it's simply the human response to something that lands bigger than what the nervous system had calibrated itself to expect. If that happens to you, if your first response to this news feels more complex than straightforward happiness, please don't interpret that complexity as a sign that something is wrong. It's actually a sign that the news is as significant as I'm sensing it is. The things that genuinely change our lives rarely feel simple the moment they arrive. Let the complexity be there. The joy will settle in fully once the news has had a little time to become real to you. I also want to say something about what to do in the immediate aftermath of receiving something like this, because I think practical guidance here is actually more useful than more reassurance. In the first few hours after big news lands, resist the temptation to immediately broadcast it widely, or to spend that time analyzing what it means rather than simply feeling it. Let there be a window, even just a few hours, where you hold the news close. Let yourself actually inhabit the feeling of it before it becomes a story you're telling other people. Those first private hours with significant news are precious, and they tend to pass quickly once the world knows and everyone's reactions start coming in. Protect them a little if you can. Let's talk about what comes after the news, because I think that's a part of this reading that's easy to overlook when the attention is so understandably focused on the news itself. What arrives tomorrow or in the coming days isn't a finish line, it's a gate. And what's on the other side of the gate is a stretch of life that looks and feels noticeably different from the one you've been living through during the waiting period. There are going to be things to do, decisions to make, steps to take, now that the direction has been confirmed. And I want you to be ready to engage with those steps from a grounded, present tense place, rather than from the days of still processing the news itself. The way to prepare for that is to start right now practicing being in your body rather than in your head. Not strategy, not planning, not rehearsing the future, just being here in this day as present and steady as you can be. The news will come when it comes. And you'll handle everything that follows best if you arrive at the moment of receiving it as a collected, grounded version of yourself, rather than as someone who's been stretched thin by anxious watching. I want to also say something about the people around you in the context of this news, because I think it matters. There are people in your life who are going to be genuinely happy for you when this news arrives. People who have been quietly rooting for you through this waiting period, possibly without you fully knowing the extent of it. People who are going to feel relief almost as strongly as you do when the news lands, because they've watched you carry the weight of this uncertainty and wanted the best for you through it. Let those people in. Let yourself receive their happiness about your news without deflecting it or minimizing it in the way we sometimes do when being congratulated feels slightly exposing. You deserve the celebration. Let it happen. There may also be people on the periphery of your life who respond to your good news with something more complicated than simple happiness. People who have their own relationship to the outcome you just received, their own feelings about where you are versus where they are. If that happens, and it doesn't always, but sometimes it does, please don't let it dim what you're experiencing. Other people's complicated responses to good things that happen to you are about them and their own journey, not about whether you deserve what arrived. Keep your focus on the people who are genuinely glad for you. They're the ones who matter most in this moment. What arrives tomorrow or in the coming days isn't a finish line, it's a gate. And what's on the other side of the gate is a stretch of life that looks and feels noticeably different from the one you've been living through during the waiting period. There are going to be things to do, decisions to make, steps to take, now that the direction has been confirmed. And I want you to be ready to engage with those steps from a grounded, present tense place, rather than from the days of still processing the news itself. The way to prepare for that is to start right now practicing being in your body rather than in your head. Not strategy, not planning, not rehearsing the future. Just being here in this day as present and steady as you can be. The news will come when it comes, and you'll handle everything that follows best if you arrive at the moment of receiving it as a collected, grounded version of yourself, rather than as someone who's been stretched thin by anxious watching. This incoming news, the call, the message, the words arriving through a screen or a speaker that change the shape of your life, isn't just good fortune randomly distributed. It's the visible arrival of something you've contributed to through the way you've conducted yourself through difficulty, through the patience you showed when impatience would have been completely understandable, through the integrity you maintained in how you kept showing up, even when the return was slow and the effort felt thankless. Through the quiet, stubborn refusal to let the waiting period convince you that nothing was ever going to move. That effort created this. Not in a mystical, transactional sense, not I was good, so now I get a reward, but in the deeply practical sense that the version of you who kept going through the hard part is also the version who kept the opportunity alive, kept the door a tiny bit open, kept themselves in position to receive what's coming, rather than walking away from it out of discouragement. You stayed, and because you stayed, this reaches you. I want you to carry that with you after this reading ends. Not just the excitement of what's coming, though you are absolutely entitled to that excitement, but the knowledge that this arrival is also yours, not handed to you, not luck alone. Yours, in the specific and irreversible way that things become yours when you've done the work of not giving up on them. Here is what I want you to carry with you right now. Keep your awareness soft and open rather than intensely watchful, because the news will find you in an ordinary moment. When it arrives, let yourself have the full experience of it without immediately rushing to manage or analyze. Give the feeling room before the thinking takes over. Know that any complexity in your initial reaction is normal and human, not a sign of anything wrong. And trust that the steps that follow the news are something you're absolutely capable of navigating, because the person receiving this news is the same person who was steady enough to get through everything that preceded it. The call is coming, the message is coming, the news is real, and it's heading directly toward you. And when it lands, and it will land very soon, you are going to feel underneath everything else exactly what you've been waiting to feel for a long time, that things are finally, genuinely turning. Drop a comment below and share what specific piece of news have you been waiting for that feels connected to this reading. I think putting it into words, even briefly, is part of the energetic preparation for receiving it. And the community reading these comments with you might surprise you with how many people are holding their breath for something very similar. If this reading felt like it was speaking directly to your situation, stay close to this channel, because what's forming around you right now is still unfolding, and I want to keep speaking into it as it does. For now, just be here, be in this day. Let your breath be steady and your awareness be open. The big news is coming, and everything it changes is going to be worth every day of the waiting that preceded it.